The Great Courses Plus is brought to you by one. The ideas of the Enlightenment had an enormous impact on the curriculum at Harvard during the 18th century. While it's true that some professors resisted these new ideas, others championed them, and among the most enthusiastic was none other than President Edward Holyoake, who we met in Chapter 4. He had been educated in England, where he'd come under the influence of Newtonian science and Lockean liberalism, and when he returned to Harvard, he began to shape the curriculum in his own image. By the time of the 7 Years' War, which America entered in 1756, Harvard was graduating students like John Adams and Samuel Adams, who would go on to become leading figures in the American Revolution. In this video, we are going to look at how Harvard educated those men, and what role the university played in the lead-up to the American Revolution. This is Harvard, the story of a university and the people who made it great. In our last video, we saw how the 7 Years' War led to a substantial increase in Harvard's endowment. The war would have a similar effect on the student body. As the war with France intensified, young men across New England sought to escape conscription into the military by enrolling in Harvard. By the middle of the 18th century, the average age of a Harvard student was 16 or 17, but with the onset of the French and Indian War, many older men were putting off marriage and military service by attending college. By 1769, Terre Were Aubert, 500 students enrolled. Harvard, like all New England colleges, was still religiously affiliated. The Massachusetts Charter of 1650 required that all candidates for admission be examined in the fundamentals of the Christian faith. But as we saw in Chapter 3, Puritan theology had shifted away from the rigid orthodoxy of the previous century. Today, ministers were much more willing to admit students who did not intend to become ministers themselves. But Harvard was not alone in its diversification. The colonial legislatures were also beginning to see the value of a college education. Sons of wealthy planters in Barbados began attending Harvard, as did the sons of silver miners from Mexico. In fact, at one point, 2/3 of Harvard students were not even from New England, while a degree from Harvard was increasingly seen as a good investment for young men from throughout the colonies. Few were as committed to the institution as John Hancock, born in Braintree, Massachusetts. In 1737, Hancock was the son of a wealthy shipping merchant. Upon his father's death, he inherited a fortune, and rather than spend his life working, Hancock decided to enroll in Harvard College in 1754. Though he had paid his tuition, he never really liked school, and after graduating in 1757, he returned home to Braintree, where he spent most of his time managing his estate. Though he had little interest in farming, he quickly became involved in politics and was elected to the Massachusetts General Court. Across town in Cambridge, Samuel Adams was taking a very different path to political prominence. Also born in Boston in 1722, Adams was the son of a well-to-do family. His grandfather had been a signer of the original Massachusetts Bay Charter, and his father was an important figure in the colony. Samuel, however, was not destined for a career in politics. In fact, he initially attended Harvard hoping to become a minister. After graduating in 1740, Adams took up the study of theology, but soon abandoned the ministry for mercantile pursuits. He joined his cousin John Hancock in the business of importing Madeira wine. Unlike Hancock, Adams had little money, so he threw himself into his work. While he was moderately successful in business, he never made much money, and he supplemented his income by serving as a clerk for the Massachusetts General Court. It was in this position that he became politically active. While both men would become key leaders of the American Revolution, their personalities could not have been more different. Hancock was known for his charisma and good humor. Adams was not. His contemporaries described him as being taciturn and disagreeable. Yet both men shared a commitment to public service and a deep suspicion of British policy. Though both men had graduated from Harvard years before, they would return to campus in the 1760s to teach. In 1760, John Hancock was appointed a lecturer in mathematics and natural philosophy, while Samuel Adams took up the study of rhetoric. By this time, the curriculum at Harvard consisted of 7 core subjects: rhetoric, grammar, logic, natural philosophy, or physics, mathematics, astronomy, and ethics and politics. There was also a requirement for 4 years of biblical study. Upon his arrival, Adams quickly set about reforming the curriculum. He insisted that students mastered the classics, reading Homer in Greek and Virgil in Latin. He wanted them to know the history of Greece and Rome, as well as English literature. Adams taught the subject of rhetoric, which combined elements of grammar, logic, and ethics. It was in rhetoric that students learned the skills of public speaking and writing. For Adams, rhetoric was not merely a matter of pleasing the audience. Rather, he taught his students to use language to persuade and inspire action in order to bring about political reform. His favorite example was the Roman orator Cicero, whose speeches on behalf of the Roman Republic Adams held up as the ideal of civic virtue. Hancock, meanwhile, was teaching the newly fashionable science of Newtonian physics. Physics was one of the subjects added to the Harvard curriculum in the early 18th century. In Newtonian physics, the universe was governed by immutable laws that could be discovered through reason. Once discovered, those laws could then be used to improve the human condition. Newtonianism was thus the perfect subject for a young American republic seeking to chart its future course. As the faculty of Harvard grew in the 1760s, so too did the number of students. By 1769, enrollment had reached over 500. This rapid growth led to the construction of several new buildings, including Hollis Hall in 1763 and Mackintosh Hall in 1769. These new buildings created much-needed classroom space, but also provided much-needed housing for the growing student body. This expansion meant that Harvard now had the capacity to educate every young man of prominence in New England. And nowhere was this more evident than in the classroom of Increase. Born in Boston in 1696, Increase was the son of Cotton Mather, the most important minister in New England. After graduating from Harvard in 1714, he became the minister of the First Church in Boston. As such, it was his duty to deliver the annual sermon before the Harvard Phi Beta Kappa Society. In 1738, Mather delivered a sermon entitled The Goddess of Discord, in which he argued that the responsibility of educated men was to advance the public good. Specifically, Mather called on Harvard graduates to engage in politics. Too many educated men, he said, shied away from politics, treating it as something beneath the dignity of a scholar. But Mather argued that nothing could be further from the truth. Politics, he said, was the highest calling of all, because it gave educated men the opportunity to serve the public good. This sermon was so influential that it became required reading for all future Harvard graduates. If Mather's words inspired his audience, they were backed up by the example of his brother, William. A decade older than Increase, William had been educated in England and was one of the first ministers to embrace the Newtonian worldview. In 1727, he published The Christian Philosopher, in which he argued that faith and reason were compatible. If anything, he said, reason made faith more meaningful. It was not the province of the minister to deny scientific discoveries, but rather to show how those discoveries pointed to the power and wisdom of God. In this way, William helped pave the way for the rise of liberal Christianity in New England. Like his brother, Increase also had a profound influence on the students at Harvard. While Increase preached the importance of public service, he taught a generation of students that science and religion were not at odds. It was this openness to new ideas that made Harvard such a hotbed of revolutionary thought. In 1769, the Massachusetts General Court purchased a tract of land north of the Charles River and laid out the streets of a new town. They named it in honor of the college. This event marked a significant moment in the development of Harvard. No longer was it merely located near a village. It now occupied the center of its own town. This, along with the construction of new dormitories and the erection of a new library building, transformed the campus. And today's Harvard Yard is the result. It was here in the heart of Harvard Yard that a group of students gathered in 1772 to discuss the events in Boston Harbor, when British soldiers fired upon a crowd of protesters, killing 5. The students rushed to join the growing crowd in downtown Boston. In the wake of the massacre, the students organized a boycott of British goods, and by 1773, the merchants of Boston had joined the boycott, cutting off the flow of British goods to the entire American colonial system. This nonviolent resistance to British policies would only grow until finally in 1775, the American Revolutionary War broke out. John Hancock and Samuel Adams would play starring roles in the coming conflict, but we'll have to leave their story, as well as the story of Harvard, until next time. Thank you for watching this episode of Harvard, the story of a university. If you enjoyed this episode and want to learn more about the fascinating world of 18th century America, I encourage you to check out the amazing courses on Wondrium. Wondrium is the rebrand of the Great Courses, and it is an amazing online learning platform with thousands of high-quality, in-depth courses spanning history, science, math, literature, philosophy, and more. The series America's Revolutionary Generation from the Great Courses is an excellent place to continue your journey through 18th century America. You can learn all about the intellectual and political ferment that gave rise to the American Revolution, from the Founding Fathers to the common foot soldiers. ULL explored the ideals of the American founding and examined how those ideals have shaped the nation and inspired revolutions around the world. I love learning, but I don't always have time to sit down and watch a whole documentary or lecture. That's why I'm so excited to partner with Wondrium. Their bite-sized pieces let me fit learning into my busy schedule. Whether primera, a bit 10 minutes, or an hour, Wondrium has something for me. And right now, viewers of this channel get a free trial and 26 off an annual subscription when you sign up at Wondrium.com/the story of a university. That's Wondrium.com/the story of a university. Thanks for watching. See you next time.